It's like he seems a little too nonchalant about it. Like, it's not really normal to stroke your partner's genitals in public. That's not
I didn't
normal.
do that. I didn't do that. Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Politics Podcast. I'm Hannah Cox with Brad Polumbo. This week, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert gets handsy and hypocritical at Beetlejuice. The red pill movement is ruining young boys, and a capitalist businessman triggers TikTok. Let's jump in. Brad, I assume most people, if you're on Twitter, if you're online, you've seen somewhat of the story. It's been floating around and circulating, but we're going to roll a recap and then we'll get into the details.
Boebert. Say it 3 times and she appears in security video from a weekend performance of Beetlejuice, where the Congresswoman was kicked out of the theater for being disruptive. The DCPA says she was vaping. Boebert's team denied that, said the haze was from fog machines in the show. That claim goes up in smoke when you see the video. The pregnant woman sitting behind Boebert told the Denver Post she asked her to stop vaping, and Boebert refused. Her one-woman show continued, taking flash photos, raising her hands and dancing, often the only one clapping or standing up in the crowd. Boebert occasionally took a break from being disruptive to enjoy the company of her male companion. He briefly had a grasp on the situation before ushers returned and told Boebert she had to leave. The theater's incident report says Boebert pulled the "Don't you know who I am" card on the way out, giving theater employees the single-finger salute.
All right, guys, just to make sure you have all your facts straight in this story, Lauren Boebert in Colorado, and she and her theater date were escorted out of a Denver performance of Beetlejuice on September 10th and accused of disrupting the show. Surveillance footage from inside the theater showed the Republican lawmaker vaping at her seat, something she initially denied. The video obtained by 9 News appeared to show Boebert having her chest groped and her grabbing her date's crotch in the theater. Boebert's companion was identified by multiple news sources as 46-year-old Quinn Gallagher, a Democrat who owns a bar at which drag shows have occurred. Can you imagine being this guy and like all of a sudden you're all over the news because you went on a date?
Well, did he not realize who he was going on a date with? She's the queen of drama.
I would think so. This is a weird pairing, right? Like, he's a Democrat. He owns a bar. Apparently, this bar has hosted drag shows. She is a far-right Looney Tune. Like, you would think he would know what he was getting into here, but I don't know.
I don't know. He just
thought she was hot on Hinge, right? And
so she is, to be fair, she is like trashy hot.
She's very hot. She's 36 years old. She's not very old, but she's actually a mama.
Yeah, which is...
No, like legitimately, she's a grandma, but she's 36 years old and she is very hot. She is quite trashy, but I don't know. I don't know if he knew much about her. Like, I genuinely like to think this was a swipe right on Hinge thing, that he saw her, she was hot, they went to the show, and now he's ended up in this position, but who knows? We don't really know the backstory in their relationship.
And it was short-lived.
Yes, I was going to say, Boebert actually says she has since parted ways with the man and that she has learned to check party affiliation before dates moving forward. The far-right Republican Congresswoman is actually known for her strong stance against drag queens and transgender people and has claimed that their mere existence sexualizes spaces, which is quite ironic considering the fact that she was all up on her date and he was all up on her in this family-centered environment. An incident report stated that Boebert protested her removal and asked, "Do you know who I am?" referring to her supposed board membership and her intentions to contact the mayor. Boebert then issued an apology late on Friday, expressing regret for the vaping incident, which again she denied, and then she claimed she had no recollection of it, and she attributed her disruptive behavior to her ongoing divorce proceedings. According to a report from Newsweek, the normally attention-seeking Colorado Republican may have run afoul of a Colorado ordinance designed to clamp down on public lewdness that, if taken to the extreme, is punishable by fines and up to 6 months in prison, along with being classified as a sex offender.
Wow.
Yeah. Busy week for Lauren.
Yeah, so I have a number of thoughts on this. I think that, prosecuting her over this is extreme. That should not happen. That's too much. She didn't do anything that extreme. Come on now. But there's a couple pieces of this that really bother me. One is just the rank dishonesty. So she denied having vaped, even though it was later shown on video footage captured at the cinema or at the theater that she was vaping, and they did ask her to stop and she didn't. So she's just dishonest. She just lied to her constituents and only admitted it after being exposed on video. That alone should be a serious red flag for people who are analyzing her credibility. Secondly, I think the question of whether this behavior is appropriate. I think most people can acknowledge this behavior is not appropriate. Give me a break. Like, you should not be copping a feel and like rubbing your boyfriend's genitalia in a public space. It's not even her boyfriend, apparently just some random dude that she was on a date with, which makes it even worse, even more trashy. I don't want to overstate the case against her in that, like, this is trashy, and she should probably know that as a congressperson, she's under public scrutiny 24/7. But it's not like the end of the world. Like, lots of people have done stuff like this. What bothers me is how it contrasts with her trad persona and the statements she's made about particular to the LGBT community. So, for example, in one of her old tweets, she says, "Take your children to church, not drag bars." And I quote tweeted this, and I said, "Grope your boyfriend at home, not in public." She's also tweeted, "Seems Joe Biden understands basic economics as well as he understands appropriate behavior around kids." Yikes, that one did not age well because there were some kids. It was mostly adults, but if you watch the video footage, you can see several kids filing into the rows around Lauren Boebert. Now, it was a dark theater, so hopefully nobody saw anything, but she did make people around her uncomfortable to the point where she got asked to leave. I also have an issue with this, "Do you know who I am?" Like, this special entitlement on display here. So for all these reasons, I really don't think it's a good look. And I just think it's really, really deeply ridiculous and offensive to me that somebody who goes around saying drag queens are out to groom kids if they read them a book while fully clothed, which, look, I'm not necessarily supportive of, but to say that and then to be basically rubbing some boyfriend you're out on a date with out over his jeans in the middle of a public theater, like, it's just giving trashy, it's giving hypocrite, it's giving gross. And yet so many people on the right are defending this. And it's just like, so many of them really are hypocrites on the family values stuff, on the social conservative stuff. And I that just is very disappointing to me.
Well, I mean, across the board, this is one reason I have no patience with the social conservatives. One, I just vastly disagree with them. I think the government has no business regulating those things, and I don't think that you should need people around you to live just as you want to live in order to have a happy life. You should be able to live as you want to live, be fine with that, and let other people do what they want to do. And that's not how these people look at the world. But we've known that they're hypocritical for some time. You don't have to look any further than their support of Trump. The Texas Attorney General, who was having an affair, just got basically acquitted by the Texas GOP Senate there last week. Like, these are the people that will defend anybody who is a member of their tribe and yet castigate anybody outside of it for the smallest infraction. And, you know, I think some of that attitude does go both ways, where we see Democrats who have defended, you know, people doing overtly sexual things in public now criticizing Lauren Boebert for this incident. So there's hypocrisy on both sides, but I think it bothers me more coming from the social conservatives because of that urge to be very authoritarian and tell other people how to live. I also thought, you know, for this incident, just taking it on its face, there was a pregnant woman whose face she was blowing vape in. That's not healthy for the woman or her baby. And this is somebody who's extreme on pro-life issues. There were obviously kids in this production. It was Beetlejuice. It's not like she was seeing Rent or something like that. This was a family type production. And I think it's interesting that not only did she try to lie about her behavior in the theater, but then once it came out on the security footage, she then says she has no recollection of it. So I'm like, so you were, what, drunk off your ass? Like, you were just
like,
completely...
was she high, you think? Was she...
Well,
I
yeah,
think it's
I'm like,
possible,
something.
and we don't know this. I think it's possible she was vaping marijuana products.
I mean, yeah, it could. Who knows, right? We have no clue. But I mean, she clearly wasn't sober. Let's say that, right? You've no recollection of your behavior in the theater.
Yeah, or she was lying about not having recollection. It has to be one of the two. Either she's like has blackouts in her memory from substances, or she's lying.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is not appropriate behavior, but at the end of the day, is it the end of the world? No, but you're a public figure. And I think most people wish we were back at a time and place where public figures had some decorum, where they presented respectably, where they would not go out in public and behave like this. Now, like we mentioned earlier in the show, Lauren is on the trashier side. I want to roll this clip. Guys, this is purely comedy. about Lauren Boebert and who she is. And I just want to reiterate, it's comedy. We're not fact checking this. This is just some comedian's opinion online. But it rings true for me in summarizing who Lauren is.
Y'all, every time I hear something else about Lauren Boebert, I become more convinced that we somehow went to high school together or something. You know, like, I know this person, man. I do. Because, see, I'm of the whiskey tango persuasion myself. And as such, I know another trash monster when I see one. Okay? I mean, you know, it's not like she tries to hide it or anything. She just got kicked out of a theater in Denver for vaping and hollering stuff, right? My fellow trailer Americans, I ask you, who among us? Okay, but no, seriously, Boebert checks so many red-ass boxes, it's insane. Right, like, she was born in Florida, aka the Fertile Crescent of crazy crackers, right, to a teen mom, Natch. She grew up on welfare and food stamps. She dropped out of high school when she herself got knocked up. Now that baby's having a baby, so she's a 36-year-old mamaw. She married, then divorced a guy who couldn't stop pulling his dick out in public. She's always talking shit about having a gun in her purse, and she has an ongoing feud with the other craziest bitch in town. That is some top shelf trashery right there. It is. Like, you just know she claims her grandma's 1/4 Cherokee, right? You just know it. And I'm saying, all that makes me kind of wish that I could root for this person.
So that was really funny, to be honest.
Yeah, my friend Hannah Cubbins sent me that, and I had a very good laugh at it. I think most of that checked for me. It all tracked. The part about her having a feud with the other, like, craziest woman in town, referring to Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is accurate. They hate each other, and it's weird.
Which is so funny because they're so close to each other ideologically. They're like, so similar.
I think they're just catfighting for the same space, right? Like,
yeah.
They're after the same territory, so they can't stand each other. So this is, I mean, just to be candid, I don't care for Lauren Boebert or her politics, and I do find this extremely hypocritical. Now, she apparently is going through it and is in the middle of a divorce. What I think is really interesting is her husband, or I guess ex-husband, I don't know where they're at in the whole...
I don't think they're formally divorced. I think they're separated but not divorced, which for a trad makes it even more suspect to be groping somebody in public, but never mind about that.
Right. Well, he actually came to her defense.
And I saw the statement.
And I'm not going to read the full thing, but he basically says that he's been seeing the attacks against Lauren. He feels that people should know the truth about their broken marriage and the burden that she carried for too long. And he goes on to, like, essentially take full blame for the breakdown of their marriage, said that she was an exceptional wife, mother, and now grandma, and that she has always given him love, support, and honored him through every misstep. That she used her strengths to cover his weaknesses throughout their 20 years together, and had an unwavering commitment to their family. And I mean, he doesn't say what he did, but he does say, I was unfaithful to Lauren in so many ways. And to me, I found this really sad because as much as I don't like Lauren Boebert, I hate to see the breakdown of any marriage. I think divorce is awful and tragic and should be avoided at all costs. And, you know, by his own telling, it sounds like she was a good wife and faithful to him, and he did some things behind the scenes to really wreck it. And, you know, I've never been divorced. I hope to never have to go through that, but I have been through some really tough breakups. And I will say, I have spiraled at times going through some of that. I'm sure I have also made a fool of myself in public, like in dealing with some of the emotional turmoil. So, like, I don't want to get to a place where we remove the humanity from people just because they are elected officials. So I think I give her a little bit of grace in all of this with that in mind. And I will also say, yes, you're a public figure. You are in a public place. You should understand that, like, you're going to be under scrutiny. But I do think it's sort of sus that this theater was like red light security filming people in the audience and then produced this video.
So
like,
I actually think it's not, and I can explain why.
You don't think it's weird? Okay.
You remember years back in Colorado, they had that infamous mass shooting in a theater.
At a movie theater, yeah. At the Joker or Batman. Yeah.
I would suspect they probably installed these cameras after that. And the reason the footage was probably released is probably because she was gaslighting. She was denying having vaped and stuff. So, of course, like, if I run a business that's involved in a public controversy and somebody is claiming something that's not true and I have the video, am I going to leak it? Probably. Like,
yeah, that's fair. I guess I just hate the idea of us being under surveillance at all times like this. And I also
we basically are now, and we have to be aware of that.
I think we have to be aware of it. I don't like it. It doesn't sit well with me. And I think it's interesting that, like, you have the White House. I saw somebody point this out on Twitter, and it's so true. You have the White House where they can't identify who brought in a bag of cocaine a few months ago, like with more security and surveillance than you would think any other place in America. And yet a congresswoman gets groped in a theater, and we've got video footage of it all over the internet.
Well, that's assuming that the White House actually can't identify it rather than doesn't want to.
No, I think that's the point. They don't want to, but it's just sort of an upside down world. And I think it does present just, I don't know, some thought provoking kind of ethical questions around the kind of world we want to live in. Like, do we really want to just accept that we're in a surveillance state and that this is how things can be weaponized against you? And this is how we want to use the internet. You know, it's not great what she did. She's definitely a hypocrite, but it's not like she murdered somebody or hurt somebody or did anything like so terrible. And yet we're going to drag this across the internet to publicly shame somebody. It's just, there's kind of some barbaric tendencies, I think, in the ways that we are using this kind of in the wild video footage online to shame people and condemn them and call attention to them. And I don't know, it does make me feel like you have to, every time you leave your house, be on guard against, you know, possibly being caught on a bad day. And everybody has.
If you're a member of Congress, you do.
I mean, I think if you're anybody at this point, you do. That's really where we're at.
Especially if you're a national political figure, right? Like she should be on her best behavior at all times in public. Like, you'd be dumb not to be. And I guess I get what you're saying. I just don't have that much sympathy for her because of how aggressive she has been in castigating others as a danger to children, as sexual deviants. And it's like, so I do have grace for her with the divorce. I think it's unfortunate. I don't think she should be like prosecuted for this. Like, come on, nobody was hurt here. But I do not feel so bad for her that she's getting dragged by the entire internet, because she has contributed to many an internet and media pile-on, and sometimes warranted and sometimes not so warranted. And so to me, it's a little bit of what goes around comes around. And then I've been incredibly disturbed as well to see so many people who wage the groomer panic about the LGBT community. And look, I host a whole show criticizing the LGBT community, but some of them take it too far and are constantly talking about sexual deviance and threats to kids and everything. So many of those same people are now adamantly defending Lauren Boebert. And it just really upsets me. So I want to roll this clip of friend of the show, Michael Knowles, over at the Daily Wire, defending Lauren Boebert and he's the trad Catholic who wants to take us back to the medieval ages in his social values. He's now defending his friend, Lauren Boebert, for public sexual fondling in public in a venue that had several children. So let's listen to him, see what he has to say, and how he twists himself into knots.
A story that I'll touch on very briefly because it would appear to be one of the top stories in the news. My friend Lauren Boebert has gotten in a bit of hot water because there was a hidden camera in a dark theater catching her getting frisky or something. Lauren has since apologized, and she said, yeah, going through stuff in my life, and I fell into this temptation of bad behaviors, and anyway, I'm sorry. It's really embarrassing and really sad. Good enough for me. Good enough. Some people were saying, how could anyone accept Lauren Boebert's apology? I think, well, I don't know, because she's on our team, and it's not hypocritical to extend a little bit more grace to the people who are your allies. That's called politics, first of all. And it's a good thing to do when your side is promoting good things and the other side is promoting very bad things. I think if someone generally, if people apologize, it's good to accept the apology. But certainly if it's someone on your team, I think that's fine. And two, I think she is legitimately embarrassed by it. And we've all done embarrassing things. And we've all done a lot of embarrassing things when we thought we were sitting in the dark. And then when there are security cameras that can see in the dark, that can be even more embarrassing. And also the third reason, and I think the strongest reason for accepting an apology like this, is Lauren is saying, look, I did something bad. I fell short of my standards and I'm ashamed of it. And I regret falling into the temptation of bad behavior for doing things that the liberals exalt as positive goods. Anything you can accuse Lauren of doing, the liberals say is good, it's empowering, it's wonderful, it's expressive, it's virtuous. And so when they attack her for it, it's obviously disingenuous, because the only crime, according to the libs now, is hypocrisy, by which they don't even really mean hypocrisy. They mean having standards and failing them, which is called sinning, which is called being human. So the only people who really would have any standing to attack Lauren for this are conservatives. And had she not apologized, I would totally get it. But she apologized. I think she's embarrassed. And I think it's fair enough to move on.
I have many thoughts on this. First, though, I want to know what Michael's been doing in the dark, in dark theaters, because I heard that and I was like, nope, cannot relate, cannot relate.
Pause. I can relate, actually. One, I also had that reaction. I was like, say more, Michael. What have you been doing? But I got in trouble at church camp one time because I was caught in a theater making out with a boy. And I went to like Fundy church camp, where they literally on the bus would be like, girls are pink and boys are blue, and there's no purple allowed at church camp. And I was making purple with a boy in the movie theater at church camp when I was 13. And I got drugged out of there by my youth pastor and then yelled at by my youth pastor for being a hussy in front of the entire cafeteria. And I never went to church camp again.
Well, so look, I'm not saying that no one's done this. I guess, as a gay person, you're just grown up extremely PDA averse for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And so I've never even like really dreamed of that kind of thing. I wouldn't, but I know people do stuff like that. I'm not saying that, but it's like, he seems a little too nonchalant about it. Like, it's not really normal to stroke your partner's genitals in public. That's not
I didn't
normal.
do that. I didn't do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then he basically just admits that they're hypocrites. He's like, yeah, it's fine to have different standards when they're on our team. He uses the words on our team. And I'm like, do you really have no principles? You have no integrity whatsoever? You're openly admitting to having double standards for what you think is ethical and right for blue people versus red people. Those aren't ethical standards at all then. An ethical standard has to be neutral.
For straight people versus LGBT people, really, that's
yeah.
what it comes down to. Because honestly, like, I mean, I know most of the hacks of the Daily Wire don't have any principles and do whatever they want, to get clicks, and they just throw red meat. And like, I get that. And a lot of people on the right are that way these days, where they don't have any standards or real morals or really principles that they will stand up for. And it's very much if you're in our team, we will do everything to protect and defend you. And if you're not in our team, we're going to come at you with everything we have. So this isn't new, but to see somebody just openly admit that, right? To have absolutely no narrative that he's telling himself to justify that. It's just on its face. She's on our team. We protect our allies. We have different standards for people who are on our team. Like, I would be so ashamed to admit that on camera if that was my low grade, value of way of thinking. But I guess he's open with it. And I mean, yeah, at least he's up front, because it's
you're just admitting that you are a tribalist partisan automaton that does not have consistent integrity and standards. You are admitting it. And I guess I do appreciate the honesty. But I also say on the merits a little bit, I disagree with him about, well, she apologized. I also agree generally that apologies should be accepted in the realm of cancel culture and most things. But she only apologized after denying and gaslighting her behavior, and then video was exposed. So then I'm a little less sympathetic. If she had apologized right away, that would be one thing. And then two, would he say that about an LGBT person who did something he found inappropriate in public? Would he say, well, they apologized, so it's totally fine, move on? No, he would not. And that bothers me.
In fact, what he said, he quote tweeted an article about Lauren Boebert potentially facing sex crime charges under Colorado's lewdness law. And he said, if Colorado is suddenly interested in cracking down on public lewdness, DAs in Republican counties ought to arrest and prosecute drag queen story hour performers and pride parade attendees. So no, he wouldn't say that. And that's why, like, it's just so openly bigoted, honestly, that I don't have any respect for it whatsoever. And this is why there's like people kind of grave dancing with Lauren Boebert right now, because of this attitude, because you are somebody who is so cruel, who is such a hack, who is somebody who is constantly trying to make other people's lives worse, who wants to force your way, quote, quote, of living on other people. And then it turns out you're not even living that way. And that's why she's not getting a lot of grace from most people. And I get that, right? Like, I try to have nuance when I look at things, even when I dislike people. I mean, just for my own humanity's sake, I try to find empathy for people and to understand the reasons why they do things or might be struggling. And I think that's an important exercise to participate in, especially if you're somebody who's very political and very online, because it's really easy to start slipping. And if you do start slipping, you end up being somebody like Michael Knowles, where you really don't have any kind of morals or principles. And instead, you just have this tribalistic mentality where anything goes as long as you feel like these people are on your team, whatever that means. And where you have absolutely no grace for anybody who is not on your team. So I think we all need to take them as cautionary tales. Don't end up like Lauren Boebert and Michael Knowles.
Hey guys, Brad here. I just want to make sure you're staying in the loop on all things space politics. We've also got 2 new shows you should check out. One is my new show, Damage Control, where I'm teaming up with right-of-center LGBT guests to restore sanity on these increasingly unhinged issues. Then there's Hannah's show, Propaganda, where she's reacting to videos of police brutality and exposing the systemic flaws in the U.S. criminal justice system. Check these all out on our individual Facebook and YouTube pages. And remember, Base Politics is a nonprofit organization, so you can help us move the culture through content by going to base-politics.com and donating today. All right, well, up next, we're going to talk about a little clip from CNN that went viral, at least in our circles, where the head of the Chicago Teachers Union, Stacey Davis Gates, was called out by CNN anchor Abby Phillip for the fact that she opposes school choice for low-income Chicago residents, but sends her kid, one of her kids, to an expensive private school. Take a listen to this discussion from CNN.
You've likened in the past private schools of today to, quote, segregation academies of the Jim Crow South. Why then send your child to a private school after speaking out so publicly against them?
I didn't speak out against private schools. I spoke out against school choice. School choice and private schools are 2 different entities.
The question I think your critics are asking is why not afford that nuance to the families who might live in the south side of Chicago and in other major cities, and they want the same choice that you were able to afford to give to your child?
Over 90% of my neighbors in my zip code send their children into schools outside of our zip code, outside of our neighborhood. This is not an issue of just Stacey Davis Gates and her family. Quite frankly, this is an issue especially for middle-class Black families all across this country, where the public accommodation is obsolete. So when we talk about choice, Abby, what we're talking about is a decision between Frosted Flakes and Cheerios. But in Chicago, and especially in Black neighborhoods, it's a decision with 0 and 0. And that's not a choice. That is, quite frankly, an ultimatum.
You are making a choice because perhaps, I assume you can afford to do that a lot of Chicago parents don't, because they can't afford it. And proponents of school choice say the state should have a role in helping those families who can't afford it make the same choice that you did for your family.
What we are faced with in Chicago is an absence of a choice, is an absence of resources. My son, he has the opportunity to play sports at a school. Sports, by the way, that are not offered at our neighborhood school. So the real scandal, Abby, is why in 2023, Black families in Chicago and across this country have to deal with such severe inequities and such high stakes.
That what you just described for your son is choice that you made for your family. And I think that's what your critics are pointing out here.
So Hannah, what do you think here? Do we have a hypocrite, or does she have a point when she says that just paying for your own private school is different from not supporting school choice?
That was one of the most hypocritical clips I've ever seen, and her eyes just kept darting around the whole time because you could tell she knew it. She was absolutely caught, absolutely busted. She wasn't prepared to truly have to answer questions in that interview, I think because it was CNN. And this is the second week in a row, you guys, that I think we're bringing you a CNN clip that's actually based, where they're actually pushing back on some of the BS coming from the left. And I don't know what's going on. I know that they've been hurting for numbers, but if they keep this up, I think this is the right strategy. CNN, let's go. This is actual journalism. This is not even, getting partisan. It's just calling spades spades. And I like that. So that was great to see from the anchor. But I thought this was just, it's not just that it's hypocritical. It was watching her try to justify her taking her son, paying for him to go to another school so he could have better access to resources, so he could access sports that he couldn't access, and just missing the point of school choice entirely. Like, absolutely, we get that that's why you would want to take your child out and put him into another school. Other families would like to do that too, and you are denying them that option and choice. And then she mentions that over 90% of her neighbors are doing the same thing. It's like, so you're saying that your public school is failing and you're trapping the lowest income people in it. And you don't think that there's a problem with that? You don't think that makes you a bad person when you are actively seeking to deny those resources to poor kids? For what? For what reason? Who does that benefit? I'll tell you exactly who it benefits. It benefits the teachers that are failing colossally in those schools and ought to be fired. It's benefiting the administrators who are sucking up all the extra money. And then she's going to claim that this is a result of us not funding these schools, which we know is absolute horse poop. We absolutely are funding the schools to the tune of $15,000 a year on average per child. And we know
actually, it's more in Chicago.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, get into the data.
The 15,000 I think is the national average, but in Chicago, this is according to a Fox News article by Corey DeAngelis. These failure factories spend over $29,000 per student per year, about twice as much as her son's private school tuition, and yet they're still failing. So the latest Illinois state assessments reveal that only 17% of Chicago public students are proficient in math, and only 26% are proficient in reading. So what we have is a largely failing public school system. And this teachers union that she is the head of actually opposed a specific program just recently called the Kids Tax Credit Scholarship Program for low-income students only, which they killed this year, and she opposed it, which would have helped students in low-income families, given them scholarships with the tax money for their education to use to go to private schools or other things. I don't have all the specifics right in front of me, but basically they've actively fought against school choice while simultaneously not being willing to send all of her kids to the public schools. So another fun quote from her, she said that she said, in a statement in an interview with Chicago Magazine last year, she said, quote, "I can't advocate on behalf of public education without it taking root in my own household." At the time, she sent all three of her children to Chicago public schools. Now she sends one of them to a private school. So the hypocrisy here is pretty clear. I think, they argue that the public schools are underfunded. That's clearly not the problem. We've thrown money at least in Chicago, they've thrown money at the system. It is broken. And elites and high earning people have another option. They can pay to send their kids to school choice, to private schools or to different schools. It's the people who are, middle class or working class or low income whose tax dollars are taken forcibly and have to go to the public school. And so to send their kid to a private school, they would have to pay double pay for education, which is a luxury only the elites have. Whereas if they had access to school choice, then the tax money allocated for their kids' education would be given to them to use wherever it's going to best serve their kid. That might be the public school. If public schools are doing a great job, and I break from some people in our camps here, I think many across the country, public schools do a good job. And the parents, if given choice, would choose to continue to send their kid to their public school. And in that case, no public schools would be defunded at all. They only get defunded if they have fewer students because people choose to send their kids elsewhere. But if they're actually doing well and meeting kids' needs, they won't be defunded at all because people will still choose them. And then if they are defunded, it's only in the sense that, well, they have less money because now they're educating fewer students. So why would they have the same money? It doesn't make sense. So to me, the whole narrative the teachers union spin here is bunk. And the fact that there's nothing wrong with her sending her kid to a private school, it's only wrong in the context of actively working to deny low-income families that same opportunity. That is pretty messed up.
Yeah, unlike you, I would love to see all public schools closed, not because there aren't some that perform okay. I think that that's fair, but because I think they're all indoctrination camps that are teaching you what the government wants you to be taught. And so I have an issue with who's running it and where the curriculum's coming from and the underlying agenda that courses throughout them. But you are right. School choice does not achieve that goal. It actually just says that the schools have to compete for the dollars, right? It takes the monopoly away from the government over education, which Democrats claim to hate monopolies until you get into the actual monopolies that the government creates that are the only ones that are long lasting in our entire country. And then they sent for them hand over fist. So it would not do that if they actually kept up. And in fact, under most school choice bills, the schools end up with more money per pupil under school choice, even when a student leaves. And that's because you can only allocate state and local school choice funding. You can't touch the federal dollars under most of these bills. And so even when a child does leave a public school under a choice program, the federal dollars stay in the school. And so you end up with more per student. So they're not even correct in their points that they're making. But I'm going to get on another high horse briefly here. And Brad, you can push back in a minute on this because I know you're not totally on board with this. But this is why I think public sector unions are unconstitutional and should be abolished and banned. The teachers' unions and the police unions are choking this country to death. They are taking your tax dollars and then they are using them against you. And they are going to state capitals and they are lobbying against things that the people are begging for, like school choice, like criminal justice reforms. And you don't get to do that. Nobody's paying you to go sit at your state capitol and petition on your own behalf. You don't get to primary somebody if they don't vote the way that you want them to. You don't have the bully pulpit of the media where you can come in and condemn people and pressure them to vote how you want to. Public sector unions are essentially government-funded positions using our tax dollars to lobby against us, and I think that they are completely corrupt. I cannot stand these institutions, and the problem is that the left is completely captured by teachers' unions, and the right is completely captured by police unions, and until people wake up to just how detrimental these two institutions are, I seriously do not think there's hope for big structural change on some of these massive issues in our country because they are choking any reforms to death. It is so hard to get school choice bills across the finish line. I've been working on this issue on the ground since 2016. I've got 2 notches on my belt. I passed a program in Tennessee when I was first working in politics. I have just recently helped get school choice across the finish line in Florida. But you guys, it's tooth and nail, even in red states, because of the money these people are spending, because of their bully tactics behind the scenes. We had 16 Republicans in Georgia flip on this issue just in this year because of these kinds of tactics in extremely red districts where school choice was very popular. And so as long as these groups are running around, your representatives are not representing you, they're working for them.
Yeah, so I get where you're coming from. I definitely acknowledge the toxic impact that both teachers' unions and police unions can and do have on our current public policy regimes. I think I also agree with you when you say that they shouldn't be allowed to lobby on the job. This is not something that private sector workers get to do. Like, they shouldn't get days off to go to the Capitol or to have their teachers' unions meetings or anything like that. I think there should be a firewall separation between job and union. I have a hard time, and I haven't fully made up my mind with the idea of prohibiting them from having any sort of union, because there is a freedom of association question for me there, because government employees still have rights as individuals and the right to collective bargaining if they want to, if they're not being forced to. I certainly don't believe anyone should be forced to join a union, public or private. But if teachers want to band together to advocate for their interests and they were to do so outside of their employment time, I think I wouldn't have an issue with that. In the sense that it's funded with dollars from their paychecks, in a sense that's tax dollars, but in a sense it's also those teachers' dollars, in that, like, when I buy, when I go to the restaurant and I pay for me and my boyfriend, I'm using my money. I'm not using Base Politics Inc.'s dollars, right? But I actually am. But it's like, once I work and get paid, it's my money. It's no longer. So in the same sense, when teachers work, I don't really think it's fair to say that's tax dollars that they're then using, unless they're using government jobs and resources, time and that kind of thing. I absolutely would support prohibiting, but I'm not fully there on just banning their unionization. I'd like to see that tested in court, if that's even constitutional in and of itself.
So just to leave you with food for thought on this, and then we can keep debating this as long as we want after the show. But I don't think there's anything wrong if you're off duty, if you're not working, and you get together with some friends who are teachers or friends who are police, and you go and you talk to representatives in your personal capacity, and even just say, like, I'm a teacher, this is my experience. I have an issue with the union. One, it is taking money off the top. So, like, It's not necessarily even passing through the teachers who then give it back. In most schools, they're taking it off the top. They are taking your tax dollars. They are then giving them to Democrats, and they are then using them to lobby against you. And it's not just that they're paying for their time to go up at state capitals. When I say they're paying for them to lobby against you, this is materials they're printing, commercials they're running. It's all kinds of like actual other lobbying activities that they are participating in that go into lobbying people against these kinds of reforms. So I do think you have your freedom of association as an individual. The government, though, does not have freedom of association. That is we the people. That's to safeguard our rights against the government. So when you're working for the government, you are a part of the government, you don't maintain those rights in that capacity. And that's why I think that if it did get to the courts, there would be a very strong argument to be made for making them unconstitutional and for outlawing them. That hasn't happened. It's an interesting, ongoing, very lengthy discussion all the way back to FDR. The one thing I've ever agreed with FDR on, I'm pretty sure, is that he thought public sector unions should be abolished. And that's the one time he was ever based in his entire life in my book. So I don't know what that court case would look like. I don't know of anyone that's like currently circulating for that to be tested, but it's on my like list of pie in the sky dream things that could happen in this country.
All right, well, up next, we're going to talk about a disturbing video that's going viral featuring a red pill streamer. You know, we've talked about the alpha male types in the past, kind of the Andrew Tate orbit. There's this guy named Sneako who's kind of like a Walmart Andrew Tate. I mean, he is kind of hopped on the bandwagon of the alpha male red pill. I'm offensive, politically incorrect. I say things like women this, women that, LGBT bad. Here's a video of him interacting with a number of fans who look to be maybe 10 or 11-year-old boys that is going viral. And once you see the video, you will understand why it's going viral.
What'd you take?
What? No, wait.
Sneako.
We love women. We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
Yes, sir. We love everybody. No.
All gays should die.
Yeah, merch. Preach. What have I done?
Can I get in the video? Fucking talk.
Can I get in the video? Yeah. Talk to him. Yo, what's up?
So, Hannah, my first thought when I saw this was I consider myself an influencer. Sneako's got a lot more followers than me or you. But if I interacted with fans and this was the kind of interaction I was having, it would immediately prompt me to deeply reconsider what I'm doing with my content, with my messaging, with my brand. And I guess if it doesn't, and he's like laughing in this video, that suggests to me that something has gone horribly wrong in your career and with your work and your identity and your message.
I mean, but this doesn't accidentally happen that you have a fan base that says these kinds of things to you if you're not pushing these narratives. I'm sorry. That's just, nobody would ever run up to me and say, F women, we hate trans people. Like, what? Because I'm not putting that out in the world. So it's not like maybe I took a wrong turn. Like, no, he knows what he's doing. I haven't ever come across him because my algorithm is curated and doesn't show me trash. But I did watch a few clips to prepare for this episode. And this is exactly the stuff he's pushing, the kind of thing he's saying. And it is interesting.
And we can insert a couple of those clips here so people get a sense of what the kind of message he's doing that's going viral.
Right. We'll do that.
There's a whole month we're celebrating men putting their penises in men's buttholes.
Okay,
like, you know how weird it is?
Wow.
That's what Pride Month is.
Bro, but
I'm proud to put a penis in a man's butt. Why are we celebrating this for a month?
Bro.
Why? Celebrate family for a month, the creation of children, the reason God made us, the highest form of human achievement. Instead, there's a month celebration for poopy dick.
Okay. Yeah.
Gay people does not produce anything good. That's just the truth. Like, yes, they
What about a gay family that adopted a bunch of kids and needed a home? That not good?
Yeah, but that kid's going to grow up weird because it's not going to have the proper family dynamic. It's worse than actually having a mother and father. Yeah, of course, I'm not going to say that all gay parents are bad, but it's more likely that a straight family is better than a gay family raising a kid. Everybody would agree with that. The nuclear family is the best way to produce a happy child. That's just true. Every single scientist, doctor, philosopher would agree that a nuclear family is the best way to raise a child.
But yeah, I mean, once you hear what he's saying, like, it's no surprise that this is what his fans are regurgitating to him. It's also no surprise to me that these red pill troll types, their audience that, you know, we often have to engage with when we comment on them because they are trolls and they'll come out of the woodwork. But once you see what they actually look like behind the scenes, you understand why they all have fake avatars. And you understand why this message is tracking, because these are little children that have squishy little brains. Like, I'm not surprised at all that the red pill audience is 10, 11-year-old little boys who apparently need better parents. Like, I mean, that's the thing that I think would be ghastly. Like, it's no surprise that this guy's fans are running up and saying this to him, but can you imagine being these boys' parents? And this is
I'd be
going viral on
mortified.
the internet. Like, you're fired from being a parent. You're awful at it. Get a hold of your son. Like, this is bleak that this is what your son is taking in, and that they're not getting better information and influence in the home to counter some of this, so that when they do encounter seediness in the world, they're repulsed by it. Like, I really do. I try to think about this in terms of my youngest brother, because he's 8 years younger than me. So he very much grew up more online than I did. And he's an angel who's never done anything wrong in his life. I stand by that. And he would be disgusted to come across this kind of content. Like, he would be actually angry about it. It would really upset him to hear some of these narratives that are out there. And that's because he had good parents who taught him to be a moral person of character and to see people as humans and to have, inherent value. And this, to me, it's gross that these kinds of people are online and preying on and profiting off of squishy little kids with brains. But it's even worse to me that there's parents out here with so little regulation of the internet in their home for their children, that their sons are taking this kind of thing in, and that they've done so little to prepare them for the world and to be actual men. Actual men would stand up against this crud, would push back on it. They'd be repulsed by it. You're failing your kids if they come out and they don't know how to encounter this as men and stand up against it.
Yeah, and look, we certainly don't want to cancel these kids, right? Like you said, they're mushy brains. They're mushy brains. They don't know what they're saying. They think it's like funny, edgy, like South Park to say this stuff. What bothers me is how one bothers me is what you're saying, like how the parents have failed to prepare them to better than this with values. I'm like, where are the fathers? I would love to know where these kids' fathers are. Are they absent? Are they not involved? Because if you're teaching your son to be a man, that should mean standing up to bullies and standing up to protect people who are getting picked on, not being a bully and judging people and saying all gays should die. Like what? Fuck women. Like, it's just, obviously it's kind of meant trollishly and tongue in cheek. I mean, but it's like still so toxic. And then the second thing that really bothers me is that these red pill types, they know, we can see as influencers our demographics. And for me and you, most of our demographics are in the like 16 to 45 range. I don't have a lot of people viewing my videos that are like 11 or 12 or whatever, because I don't do content that appeals to that market. But Sneako, for example, like is a streamer, and I think he's on some of those platforms doing like video games and that stuff, and that's when you attract that young audience. And he will know that. He has access to his analytics. So he should be exponentially more responsible with the way he speaks when he knows he has young people listening to him. And yet, if anything, he's the opposite. He's incredibly irresponsible, spouts total nonsense. Like the clips we're going to insert, he talks about how people with gay parents will turn out worse. Many studies, they turn out just as fine, and in some cases do better, because the types of gay people that become parents is only a small subset of the gay community, and they're usually extremely affluent, so those kids have all the opportunities in the world. And he says things like, he talks about being gay and exclusively just sexually denigrates it. And he says, talk about the family or love instead of talking about gay people who just like this specific type of sex or something, which that has nothing to do with being gay. Being gay is about romantic orientation and who you love and what your family looks like. And sex is just a small part of that. But so he clearly doesn't even understand the communities and people he's talking about and denigrating in such harsh ways to impressionable audiences. And I think that is truly contemptible.
Yeah, I mean, I have absolutely no pushback on that. I think it's a disgrace. I can't imagine looking back on your life and how you could justify that as your job. That's what you left the world. That's what you contributed. You made everything worse. You made gender relations worse. You halted the growth and maturity of young boys. I mean,
You probably made millions of dollars.
What a waste of space. I can't imagine feeling good about yourself when you go home. And, I don't think these people do feel good about themselves. I think that's where a lot of their animosity and hatred comes from. I think they have a lot of just deep self-hatred, and that gets projected out there. People who are well-rounded, well-adjusted, successful people, they don't think like this. They don't talk like this. They don't have these attitudes. So whenever I see this kind of thing online, that is always my first clue that this is somebody who's really struggling. And to me, I guess because I was raised really well, it's always a sign that I don't want to take any advice or input from this person because they really seem to be a bit of a mess. But unfortunately, some of that bravado gets picked up by other weak people, and they see it as somebody who's projecting strength or has some kind of figured it out in some way or something. I don't know how it attracts them, but it really should just be the first sign against listening to anybody. Anybody who's consumed with hate is not going to be able to see straight.
All right, well, finally, is it outrageous that a capitalist TikToker is talking publicly about how he hires people in Pakistan to work for him remotely and pays them only $4 an hour? Take a listen to the video that he put out that has attracted some truly, truly vicious backlash.
I pay employees at my marketing agency $4 an hour, and they're extremely grateful to be working with me. Let me explain why. For administrative level stuff at my business, like formatting spreadsheets, setting up email accounts, I hire a virtual assistant from Pakistan and pay them $4 an hour. Now, the average income every month in Pakistan is $280 US. With the $4 an hour they're getting from me, they get $160 a week or $640 a month, which is almost 3 times the average income over there. A really great living for them. They live very, very well. Now, if they do really great work for me, I can raise their pay to $5, $6, even $7 an hour, which is 4, 5, 6 times the average monthly income of a typical person in Pakistan. They do really great work for me. They're really grateful to be working with me because of the money they make. They have a great income. I get a great employee, and it's a win-win. Before you leave a comment, yes, I have US-based employees. Yes, they make way more than $4 an hour. I'm just saying for this specific task, I pay a Pakistani assistant $4 an hour, and they are very appreciative of it.
So this it went viral on TikTok, but it also went viral on Twitter, and someone tweeted the video and said, "Capitalism is evil, I don't care." And Hannah, I picked out some of the responses to this from Twitter. Can you just read them so listeners can get a sense of how this guy's statements were received, at least by some folks on Twitter?
Sure. So lots of blue checks in here. Sada Shan says, exploitation at its peak. And then Cool Cat said, exploiting people across the world via the internet. Another person said, evil man. And Betty Boo said that he's even comfortable filming this is sickening. Another person said, to the gallows, which, guys, is communist slang. They do want to murder you. Just a quick reminder there. And then lastly, someone said, so he has slaves.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this is exactly what I thought I'd find on left-wing Twitter responses.
Yeah. And then the TikTok responses were similarly vicious and delusional. I'm going to insert a supercut of the responses here.
Look, it's nice that you're creating jobs. People are happy, but they'd be happy if you pay them $2 an hour. They just need money. You're exploiting the fact that you could get labor done cheap there just because the dollar goes a lot further there than it does here. You don't understand that they're actually desperate for that dollar. You'd be paying someone $15 per hour to do the same type of work here that you're paying $4 per hour in Pakistan. I don't care if a dollar here feels like $10 to them. You could afford to pay them more. You said you make $1 million per year or whatever. I saw your videos. Why then do you need to exploit someone at $4 per hour to do your dirty work?
He spends the next 50 seconds saying, I underpay my employees, without saying the words, I underpay my employees.
You just want to go to the front of the guillotine line?
So first and foremost, it's interesting to me how you can almost peg who's a communist just by how they look, without fail. I can almost always gauge, back when I was on dating apps, I could pick them out on sight, nope. So anyways, that's just one observation. But yeah, it's so unnuanced. They're so unoriginal in their critiques, and they never are actually that sympathetic or compassionate when you really dig into the crux of their arguments, and they don't even take the time to really flush out what they're arguing against to recognize that. It's not compassionate to be mad about this. These people are desperate for dollars, like they're saying. So what is your alternate here? That he shouldn't hire them, that he shouldn't pay them because he's not paying them what you think they should be paid? And really, like, anytime you get into these sort of overseas labor arguments, whether it be about factories or it be, you know, how much you're paying somebody to do work in another country, you always get into this terrain. And it shows to me that, one, people have no understanding of how economies and countries as a whole industrialize and grow and become first world countries, right? You don't have a third world country that just poop overnight ends up being a first world affluent country. You have to have a progression in their economy and in their workforce for them to get to that point. And guess what? It starts with factories. It started with factories in the US too. And then it changed and that progressed and moved away. And now it's starting to industrialize other countries. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for them, because it is industrializing their countries and it's paying them a lot more than they could ever have made previously. It's keeping them from digging for food outside in the trash. And it means Americans are getting cheaper products. And this is why I am a globalist, which is always used as a terrible slur. But in reality, it just means that you actually truly believe in free trade and in capitalism, and that it can lift all boats. And it truly does. And so these kinds of attitudes, it's not helping the people that you think you're helping. You're actually just arguing against them being able to get on that first ladder rung to begin moving up to hopefully they get to a point in their country where they could be paid $15 an hour to do a computer job. That's amazing. But that's not going to happen just because you wish everything felt good and could be kumbaya. It's a childish, naive idea of how things work. And also, again, how workforces industrialize and get to that place where they could create that much value. So what this man is doing is keeping his costs down. That, I'm sure, helps him to innovate more, invest more in his company, probably spend more at other businesses around him, which again lifts all boats, benefits those employees, benefits those other businesses, and also helps him probably pay other positions more in the US since he's being able to offset that. Like this sort of arrogance they have of you're a millionaire, so you can afford to pay him more. It just shows me you've never run a business, number one. You don't understand what his costs are.
Probably wouldn't exist if he had to hire someone. This is like an assistant, like making databases and doing email stuff for him. If he had to pay him,
he could use ChatGPT for that, honestly.
Pretty soon, at least. But if it is not worth it to him to pay an American $15 an hour to do that, but it is worth it to pay someone $4 an hour. No American would do it at that rate, even if that was illegal, and it is illegal. And so what we have here is a mutually beneficial, consensual trade interaction that inherently leaves both parties better off, or they wouldn't agree to it. And yet people are mad about this. Here's the thing. If that person in Pakistan could earn more than $4 doing something anywhere around them, they wouldn't choose to engage in this. They would go do that other job. If there was an $8 an hour job down the street, why on earth would they do this? They wouldn't. That means it's a better option than anything they have available to them. In fact, it sounds like it's actually quite a good option that pays way more than most people in Pakistan are earning, and way more than the Pakistani minimum wage or whatever. And so it's probably a much above market rate there. And then for him, it's only worth it to hire someone to do these low-level assistant tasks at that kind of a wage. Like if he had to pay an American on his staff, pay the taxes, pay them $15 an hour, put them on the payroll, pay the government all this money, it wouldn't be worth it. He'd probably just do it himself or not do those tasks. And so what we have here is a win-win that some people are mad about. And it's always so funny to me. It's like these woke white saviors, these minorities in other countries want to do this work at this rate. And they're like, actually, I know what's better for you. That should be illegal. And it's like, no, Susan, you don't know what's better for other people than they know for themselves. And you're not offering any alternatives. You're just looking down on a win-win situation. I want to play his response video to the critics. He's handled this really well. Take a listen to what he had to say.
If someone offered you $45 an hour to work for them, would you say no? Probably not. But when I say I pay my Pakistani employees $4 an hour, which is triple the minimum wage, everyone gets mad at me. $4 an hour in Pakistan is the equivalent of $45 an hour in the United States. Every single one of my employees is grateful to work for me. They're happy. They do great work. They live a great life over in Pakistan. If you run a business, look to pay for international employees that do the same level of work as an American hire.
So he also started posting these messages that he's been getting from around the world. I want to read you this one Twitter DM. Listen, man, I just saw your video on the $4 an hour. I live in Kenya, and if you'd offer me a job like that for $3 an hour, I can pay my school fees for the semester in 2 weeks. I'm comp literate, and I'm a self-taught coder. I'm still an amateur, but I can handle your spreadsheets and even more. Another person says, hey, I saw your TikTok where you talked about paying Pakistani workers $4 an hour. Is there any way I can work that same job? What are the skills required for that job? Another hilarious thing he posted was a message that he got from a Pakistani person on Twitter. And the screenshot says, as a Pakistani, unironically, I appreciate you doing this and giving my people employment. Heart emoji. The person said, ignore these weird low testosterone liberals. Hire more Pakistanis. They don't complain like Americans.
I love that. Based.
It's like these people, it's such a better option for people around the world that they saw that and they're hitting him up like, can I get in on this? And that's what these woke socialists don't seem to understand. Like, he is literally extending a wonderful opportunity to these people, and they're looking down on it because they want to live in this mythical utopia where a person in Pakistan with no education can somehow be worth paying $15 US an hour to do spreadsheets or something. Like, it's just not reality. So why are you looking down on the best of a win-win situation that is rooted in reality?
It's exploitation, and I should be paid $15 an hour for something that could literally be automated. Like, your jobs will go away for these low-skill type opportunities, and or the pay will come down, and there will be others who will be glad to do them. And that's what they don't like about capitalism, I think, right? Is that you have to actually compete. You have to actually be bringing value. And these are the types of people who don't really want to work. They say this quite openly all over TikTok. They don't really want to create value. And they can't stand the fact that these people overseas are hungry to work, have ambition, have drive, and are happy to do this kind of task and can be paid a lot less for it and still have a great quality of life elsewhere because, again, they're living in third world economies. And so I think that's really what it comes down to, is this is a threat where they want things to go the other way, where they're more baked into their jobs and less is asked of them. And the unions are saying they only have to work 4 days, they get paid for 5. Like, this is what they keep thinking they're going to get to. But actually what's going to happen is the more you pass stupid laws like that and the more you allow unions to shake down businesses, the more they're going to go do this. They are going to outsource things. They are going to go overseas, and you deserve it for pushing for economically illiterate policies that hurt this country, that hurt our economy, that make it impossible to run a business or keep good employees. And so I think that's kind of at root here, right? Like, it's not just that they have this fantastical idea of how things work. It's that they are desperately trying to avoid the reality of the situation, and they're trying to cloth that in this concern for other people, and like they're, so worried about their quality of life. Like, no, this is an amazing thing for people in these countries, and in doing that, he is actively infusing more money into their economies, which again can help them progress and grow. So he's
just exploiting them. They're basically his slaves, Hannah.
He's the good guy, you're the bad guy. It's not really that, nuanced here, guys. And honestly, yeah, like, it's the anti-hero, right?
And also, like, what have these people done to provide opportunity for people in second world countries?
Nothing. I'm confident of it. I can tell you right now. I've done nothing to, not only in other countries, but nothing for anybody here either. These are not people who are out creating value and pulling anybody up behind the steam in their sails. Like, that's not what's going on here. So I love this guy. I love that he's like willing to counter the bullies and come on and address this sort of thing online, because I'm sure he knew when he posted this there would be tremendous backlash, but somebody needs to, counter this sort of stuff and really make these people have a come to Jesus, because I think they're so deep in their echo chambers and their algorithms that they're really not being pushed back on with this sort of crud. It's kind of interesting to me. And just a side note, but I was reading the replies to this overtly left-wing, like, crazy LGBTQ tweet. Brad, I'll send it to you for damage control because you might want to cover it. And I thought it was satire. It was so bad. And then I was reading, I'm like, oh my God, no, this is serious. And then all of the responses to it were like, yes, queen, amazing, this is great. And it's like, what? no. Anyways, but it just made me realize how much people get into their echo chambers of just responses even, right? Like they so seldomly have somebody come in and be like, no, this is cracked. Like what you think is absolutely insane. And only people deep in your bubble agree with you, but they're not having anybody poke a hole in that bubble. So I think that it's great that he came along and did this, and I'll definitely be following him from now on.
All right, Hannah, what's your hot take?
My hot take is sad. But I saw last night one of my friends lost a dog that passed away after like 16 years. And people, they do this a good bit when they lose a pet. They post about it. And I understand that I posted when I lost my dog Toto a number of years ago. And it was really sweet how many people reached out. But every time I see it, even if I don't know you, it guts me. Because losing a dog, and I'm sure any other pet, but I've owned dogs, is the worst pain I've ever been through in my life. And I really don't even feel bad saying that at this point. I used to feel guilty because I've lost family members, grandparents, and obviously I was very sad about that. But something about when my dog died a few years ago, it leveled me in a way I was not prepared for. Couldn't stop crying. I had to go back to therapy about it. I was devastated. I already live in immense fear every day of Phoenix dying one day. I'll literally just be sitting here and start thinking about Phoenix dying and I'll start crying. I'm crazy. But my hot take is that this is the one thing that makes me question God the most, because, I think there's a fair argument to be made that if there is a God, he wouldn't allow dogs to die. You would just have them with you your whole life. They would never die. They'd be your constant companions. And that's the world I want to live in.
All right. Well, that's quite a profound one.
So I told you it was sad. I'm dark today.
My hot take is that people need to learn their place a little bit more when they're sending messages to strangers. Just the amount of unsolicited advice or feedback I've been getting lately, especially since I started doing TV again more regularly from randos. It's like, I didn't really need to know, Bethany from Ohio, that you think I smile too wide. Or that I don't blink enough, or that just people, I just get all these messages from people that just feel I'm a complete stranger. We have no relationship, no connection, and you just feel free to just chime in on my appearance, analyze me, send me all these criticisms. I'm like, I don't know you from Adam, and I don't really care about your opinion, or maybe I care about it somewhat, but it's just people are so blunt and they're so audacious. And they would never just say that to someone in person, but something about social media or digital messaging, just it makes people very bold with the things they'll write to you or say to you.
Yeah, I've had that experience a bit too. Usually it's older women complaining about me not being covered up enough on top. They're like, you need to wear higher cut shirts. You have your boobs out. It's inappropriate. You're dressed too slutty. And I'm like, I'll be a business suit with a very normal shirt on. And yeah, it is very odd behavior. I'm curious who those people are in real life, because never have I ever been watching absolutely anything and thought, I'm going to go find that person and DM them absolutely anything, anything other than maybe I really liked what you had to say. Maybe I would do something like that, but that's it. This is abnormal behavior, period. It's not just the decorum. It's just why are you doing that? What is your life that you watch Fox News and let me track down this guest to comment on their appearance? It's very strange behavior, and people
I never mind the substantive feedback. I disagreed with you about this, or I really liked what you had to say about that. But I do find the pedantic analysis of appearance, and it's most of the feedback you get is that. And then a small portion of it is substantive. And I appreciate that feedback. Even if they disagree with me, even if they think I'm wrong, I'm happy to hear from them. But I don't appreciate the being put under the microscope, because also it's you click on their profile. It's never there's some drop dead looker.
I stand by this. Never have I ever, not once, seen attractive people online commenting on other people's appearance. It's never happened. It will never happen. Pretty people don't do this. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a comment, but not about our appearance, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. And until next week, stay based.